Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October episode. I'm Jennifer Lee, lead admin evangelist at Salesforce. And if this is your first Automate this is a monthly series showcasing trailblazers like you doing some amazing things with automation. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back. So let's take a quick peek at where folks are joining us from, and we don't have places. So we're going to come back a little later for that. All right. So very excited for today's episode. It's going to be packed with powerful automation solutions from my two amazing experts, Becca Dente and Michael Barnes. So Becca is going to walk us through her brilliant solution of managing marketing to sales SLAs. She's going to leverage custom metadata and custom fields, have it integrated with Slack to ensure smooth handoffs and timely follow-ups. Now, Mike Barnes will show us how he uses Flow to dynamically look up records to gather those email addresses for alerts without having to hard code a single one. All right, so the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream episode page. You get an email reminder the day of the event. And to interact during the live stream, you can post your comments in the chat and interact with other viewers. To engage me and my guest presenters, start your question with a Q colon so that we can quickly scan through, identify those questions, and tag them for the Q&A segment in a little bit. So here's what you're going to learn in today's episode from Becca. We're going to learn how to build clean, efficient flows, how to calculate business hours using a free Salesforce Labs app. We love free stuff. And how not to be scared of calling Apex from your flows. All right. And then what we'll learn from Mike's presentation is how to use Flow to send dynamic emails without having to use email alerts. So we're going to be using the simple email action. We're going to build dynamic recipient lists for these alerts and reference email templates if desired. Oops. All right. So very excited to be joined by Flownatics, Becca and Mike. Welcome to Automate This. All right.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, so let's get to you, Becca, first. So, Becca, you were, I think, one of the first Salesforce MVPs, right? So, how did
I
you?
was.
So, what year was that? Like way back when, huh?
That was, yes, that was December, Dreamforce, when it was in December one year, December of 2010.
Oh, wow. So, share with us, how did you get started with Flow Builder? Was it with Cloudflow Designer, I'm assuming, back in the old UI?
It was, and I will say at that time, it was really overwhelming and scary. Um, it definitely felt like more of a developer tool, and I was definitely intimidated. I didn't understand what a lot of the things were, and it's much easier in the new UI for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Folks who have only known Flow Builder, you don't know how good you have it for sure. So, what would you say is your favorite Flow feature and why?
That's tough because as more things are added, there's just so much that I love. But I will say one of my favorite things to do is craft a really well defined decision element so that I can make sure things go to the right places and I can take very deliberate action on them. So I love a good decision with a lot of branches on it.
Great. All right. So, Becca, I would love to hear your use case.
Yeah, so this is actually something I've built for a few different clients of mine. I'm in the Salesforce consulting space after being in-house for many, many years. And I work with a lot of sales and marketing folks. And so what happens often is the handoff between sales and marketing can become a black box. Marketing doesn't know, are the things we send over getting followed up on? Are they getting followed up on in a timely manner? Marketing and the sales folks, excuse me, they want to see it. They get so much noise, their inbox is packed. They sometimes miss things that marketing is sending to them saying like, hey, this is a hot lead. We want you to follow up on it. And so I've put together for multiple clients of mine is the solution that I'm going to show to you, which is uh, getting those leads handed off in an efficient manner, getting those reps notified. We're going to show a Slack notification in there, and also having an SLA between marketing and sales. So I get my clients to agree on what that is, and it varies by industry, by what they're selling, what they want that follow up to be. It can be a matter of minutes, it can be days, and I'll show you how you can set that up in this flow. But once they agree on an SLA, then it's asking them to respect that and respond in that time. So sales says, great, marketing, what you send to us, we're going to respond in X time frame, and then holding them accountable to that. And if you want, let me share my screen and show you that flow. All right, before we dive into the meat of the flow, I want to start off with the free Salesforce Labs app from the App Exchange. Without this, it would be a lot more complicated to build what I'm trying to build. And I gotta love Salesforce Labs and got to love the price of free. So I'm using this app called Business Time. What this does is it allows us to calculate time differences based on what you enter as your organizational business hours. So if you go and get this app installed, it's going to install a bit of Apex that we're going to call in our flow. It's also going to install some custom metadata. And I'm going to walk you through that in a second. But this is sort of the secret sauce to the flow that won't set the SLA to late at night. It won't set your SLA on a weekend or on any holidays that you have. So it's really, really cool. And I like to use it because nobody wants to have an SLA when they're not working. So once you install Business Time into your org, one of the things you'll see is this custom metadata. Now, a lot of us button click admins may not be familiar with custom metadata and custom metadata types. We were all new to things at one point. I was fairly new to this when I started building this solution, but custom metadata types, you can think of them as another object in Salesforce. You can add fields to them, you can create records, but they're records just for admin and development purposes. So they exist in setup and not out there in your org. And so that's how I like to explain them to people. As you can see here, if anyone's familiar with, classic UI, it sort of looks like when you would create a custom object in Classic. You have the name of your object, and then you have the standard fields, and then any custom fields that you put on it. So in this case, our object is business time, and we added custom fields of hours, minutes, and number of days. And we can use these to determine that delta creating that SLA. So these are our custom fields. And then you'll see this button called Manage Business Time. It's going to be manage and then whatever your name of your metadata object is. If I click in there, you can see for this example, we have a 30-minute SLA and a 60-minute SLA. And that's just how we're defining these. But again, custom metadata types can be any records that you want to call within your automation. Now I'll jump into my flow and show you how we're using these features. So my flow is going to start when the contact hits a marketing score, when their marketing score is changed. And first we're going to go run down the Run Immediately branch. Like I said, I love a good decision tree. So you can see right here, I have a decision based on that marketing score. If I pop this open, you can see how I have my logic set up. Let's pop that open. And you can see here that my very first evaluation criteria is score above 100. So right now we're looking at the marketing score. Is it greater than or equal to 100? 100 plus. That's going to be the first criteria that's evaluated. Next, we go down to the 75 to 99. And again, keeping it really simple, we don't need to set that top limit because these execute and fire in order. So we already are taking out everything 100 or above. And so now we're going to say greater than 75. Everything else, I'm going to put in the not MQL bucket. One thing I really love to do when making a decision tree is actually give that final outcome a name instead of just leaving it as not met. It's just an organizational thing for me, but it really helps me sort of communicate to other people looking at my flow what I'm trying to do, so that if someone else needs to come in here and make changes, they'll know what I was trying to do with each of my decision criteria. The next thing we're going to do is do a get records to find those business time records. Like I said before, custom metadata is essentially just another record in your org. It's just not a public facing record. So here we do a get records. If they go down the 100 branch, we're going to get that 30-minute SLA. If they go down the sort of the warm branch, as it were, we're going to get that 60-minute SLA. So again, I'll pop these open and show you what they look like. I'm getting the object of business time. Again, custom metadata is an object at the database level. And here I'm just looking for the first record that starts with 30 minutes. I know that there's only one, but that's how I have this criteria set up. Similarly, I just copied and pasted and then updated this one to get that 60-minute SLA. Then again, to keep it nice and contained, a nice, simple, sleek flow, I like to then combine them. So one thing I didn't show is that with these get records, I'm actually storing them in this variable. So right here, I'm referencing that variable. I'm grabbing the ID and the relevant fields and popping them into that variable. And I'm doing the exact same thing in this other branch of the flow, popping them into that exact same variable. This allows me to then combine my flow down into this single path, so I only have one path to maintain if I want to update this in the future. Next, I'm doing a set MQL time. So essentially what I'm doing is just updating my original record to set our MQL time, to set the stage to MQL and the current time. This is not part of the SLA. This is just a way to report on when that record became an MQL. The next step is to assign the minutes. And this is where I'm going to take the variable that I set up top and do an assignment in there. So you can see I'm setting a new variable, variable minutes, and grabbing the minutes per hour from the business time record that I found in my get records up above. The next stage is the one that might start to scare people, but this is where we calculate our SLA. As I mentioned before, this bit of Apex comes as part of that business time package. So no need to worry about writing any Apex. That is part of that Salesforce Labs package. You can see here, I'm saying the date and time value that I want to input is whenever the flow runs. The time I want to add are those minutes that I assigned in the assignment. And then we do need to set our advanced options. We need to grab the output of that calculation, and that becomes our SLA due date or our due time. And we're storing that in yet another variable. Finally, on this branch, the last thing we need to do is set that SLA on that record. So you can see here, we're taking that variable, that's the output of the Apex, and dropping it into the SLA due date and time field. That's sort of the meat of it, but we also want to notify our sales reps in Slack. So we've got an asynchronous branch of our flow that just is a quick Slack action. I'll pop this open to show you what that looks like. We're going to notify sales using the send Slack message. I connected it using the Salesforce for Slack app, connected it to my workspace, and have it sending as Slack. The conversation ID is the channel ID, which you can grab from the info of the channel. The contact record is the record that triggers this flow. And then the Slack alert is a text template that I created over here that just has some details of that message. So let me show you what that looks like from the end user perspective. Here we have our contact, Ms. I'm a Voter, and she just came into our website, maybe downloaded some of our great content, and has a new updated marketing score. When we hit save, the magic is going to happen. So you can see here, she's been updated from a prospect to an MQL. I also love a formula field that displays an image, so you can see she's got her timer going on the SLA. If we pop down here, you can see our SLA is due in a half an hour from now. And then if we pop right over to our Slack channel, you can see there's a new MQL to be acted on, name, score, and a link right into the record. That's my solution. And now back to you, Jen.
Awesome. So I love how you extended your Salesforce implementation using Salesforce Labs app and how you don't have to build and maintain code. And the best part is it's free. Plus the custom metadata type is definitely a config item that any awesome admin should have in their tool belt to avoid having to hard code things, because we all know hard coding is bad. And I loved how you showcase Salesforce with Slack. It's awesome. All right, so now we're going to move over to Mike. Mike, I believe you've also been in the ecosystem for quite some time as well, right?
Yes. Yep. So my first Dreamforce was 2011, where I actually saw Flow introduced, which was pretty exciting. So I've been doing Salesforce since about 2010. Didn't get to Dreamforce to 2011, but I've been doing this for a little while.
So how did you get started building Flow? I'm assuming because it's 2011, it was the Cloudflow designer, but what got you started?
That's right. Yeah, so it was super exciting to see it released because I'd been, of course, using just the regular standard workflow rules. I am not a developer, so Apex really frightened me back in the beginning. I had a developer on my team who would write some code, but it was always pain to maintain. So when I found, man, I can do so much more now on my own without asking the developer to write some Apex for me, this is fantastic. So that's what got me in right away. And I've been on the front end of Flow every step of the way as it's developed and become so much more than it was all those years ago.
So same question for you as I asked Becca. What is your favorite Flow feature and why?
Oh goodness, I probably the ability to loop through records, which you'll see here in a minute in my demonstration. I like that you can grab a list of records and work with basically without having to do any kind of fancy batch coding. You can grab a group of query a group of records or get a group of records and work with them, make updates to them, or check for information across multiple records. So I do like the loop functionality. That's been handy.
Great. All right, Mike, tell us about your use case.
Absolutely. So my use case is where we have an email alert, but we want to make it send it to variable users or variable contacts, I should say, based on that account's needs. So sales team, we want them to define who the recipients will be for a particular type of alert. And instead of just either blasting every contact on the account or having a hard coded or a lookup relationship field on a record that points to a contact. That's how we pick up and send. You can do those things, but sometimes you want to send to one or many contacts on accounts, and you want your sales team or somebody else in your organization to define who the recipients will be. So in my use case, we set up a way to identify those contacts and then build a flow that can then grab all those contacts, loop through them, and attach those email addresses to a list of recipients who will then be on the email alert, and then send the email alert. We can send the email alert then directly from the flow. So that's what I will show here in a moment, just how we can now dynamically create a recipient list from not only just from one object, but maybe from a couple different places, and send that out without, again, having to hard code anything, without having to use a legacy email alert, which is a little bit rigid as far as how you can define the recipients in those, which frankly is a classic feature. So now this is a lightning flow way to accomplish this. So let me go ahead and share my screen. I can start walking through the flow. So the prerequisite, I'll just go ahead and jump in and show you real quick, is I had to create a receives email checkbox. This could, of course, be more specific if it's for a specific type of email alert, but we do have this checkbox I put on the contact record that, again, I can now add to a front-end layout for my users to identify the contacts that should receive any particular email. So that's my prerequisite before I built this flow. Then I went ahead and make this. Need to call it from another location, but I made it screen flow just for demo purposes, so don't feel you have to make it a screen flow. So all I'm doing here is saying send emails, and when you click the finish button, hello, am I back on?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I had a little technical challenge there. So first thing we're going to do is go ahead and click on the get contacts on account records. So this element is just looking up for, in this case, I'm starting from an account. You could start from any object in Salesforce as long as you have a contact, you have a way to look up related contacts. In this case, I'm pulling all contacts as they relate to an account. It could be that I'm on another object that relates to an account. Then I can, as long as I get the account ID, I can pull all the contacts related to that account. In this case, I've got the receives email true, and I have an active checkbox that I always put on my contact object that I also make sure is also true. So I'm not pulling any inactive contacts that users have flagged are no longer part of that account. So the receives email, that's that field that I showed you just a moment ago on the contact object. And I'm just storing all those records. I'm letting Salesforce do the work here. That's one of the beautiful features of the latest version of Flow, last few versions, I should say, is you can now store all records automatically, store all fields. You don't have to build any collection variables or anything to store that information, which was part of yesteryear with this tool. Anyhow, now we have all the contacts in this collection variable that's been generated by Salesforce. First thing I like to do, though, anytime I do a get, and I know I need to I need to have records before I can do any work with them, is make sure I got something back. So I didn't get any contacts on the account, then I'm going to go ahead and tell folks, hey, sorry. In this case, since it's a screen flow, I can let them know via the screen flow that, sorry, nothing came back. If it was a record triggered flow, I could use an error handler to let them know, hey, that nothing came back. And as long as they're in the UI, they may see the error message as to why that maybe didn't do the thing we expected it to do. So in this case, I know I'm going to, of course, follow the path where we have recipients or found. So again, always a good idea to do decision just to make sure you're not going to try to work with an empty set, an empty record variable, as that could cause you some headaches or cause unhandled fault errors, which no one likes in their flows. So the next thing I'm using here, instead of looping through the records, which I could do, that's actually how I would have done this, a couple of releases ago. But just recently, one of the last releases, we have now a transform element available. And what this allows me to do is instead of having to create a collection variable manually, and then loop through records and do an assignment, which is what I'll show you in a minute. I have another use case for that. This allows me to directly map, in this case, the email address that's on my contact object directly to a target endpoint that I create right inside of the transform. So I would click this plus, it would automatically, I would define that I want, just in this case, a text list element, or a text collection variable, as it's called. And it automatically named it, for me, or I name that. But then I just click on the dot here, and then click on the dot here next to my element, which of course doesn't exist and it's already mapped. Now I could unmap it, but I'm not going to do that right now. So it will then create that line, that connection between those two elements. You can map this in. This is very useful for this use case where I've just got to, again, trying to create a list of email addresses, but transform can be used, of course, for many other use cases. But this is a simple way to avoid having to create, two elements, and now I only have one. Simplifies the flow a little bit, which I'm always happy to do where feasible. So now that we've mapped and created our collection variable inside the transform, we've mapped the email addresses from the context we found into that transform. The next step, I decided, well, geez, what if it's not just the context? We also want to include the account team on this. Well, again, in a classic email alert, I could, as long as my object, in this case, I'm on the account, so I have the account team available in a classic email alert. Let's say I'm on a custom object that has a lookup relationship to account, and I want to include the account team. Well, the classic email alert's not going to work in that scenario. It will only reference the account team if there's a master detail relationship. So classic email alert may not be the best solution there. In this case, what I could do is I could look up, as long as I have the account ID lookup relationship that available, I can say, well, wherever I have that account ID, go ahead and grab the account team for that account. It doesn't matter if it's master detail or lookup relationship, it'll pull that account team in. And again, I'm storing all the records right there in the automated collection variable. Don't have to do anything else beyond defining what I want. In this case, I'm going to go directly to looping through the records. And the reason I'm okay skipping the decision, normally I'd say always do a decision after a get, is because loop has a great feature where if there's nothing in the collection variable that I'm trying to loop, it'll just go to the last element. It won't try to do anything inside the loop. So I don't have to worry about an empty set causing this to break. If there's no account team for whatever reason set, then it will not actually, it'll just do nothing and continue on. But if it does find any account team members, it'll start to do the for each element. So for each record that it finds in that collection that I just generated from the get, it's going to add to that original contact email list you saw. You saw the API name up there in the transform. That is the same record collection variable that I had before. And I'm just going to go ahead, in this case, add the account team user's email. So this is what the reason I'm doing this in a loop instead of the transform is in a transform, I only have direct access to the parent objects or the primary objects fields. And because this, the account team object that I'm getting, in this case, I'll go back to that and point that out. The account team member is how I'm pulling these in. It's not just the account team, it's account team member on that account, related to that account, is actually a join object that connects accounts to users. So in order to get the email address, I have to drill into the user record. And so that's where we're able to do that here again in Flow. We can look up not only because it's in a collection variable, I didn't do any mapping directly. It automatically brings in not only the direct relationship, the user record, but it lets me drill into all the fields on the user record, which is really amazing, right? So I don't have to do any additional lookups or gets to get down to that email address. It's already available right from this one get element. So keeping it simple usually is the better way to go. So now that I've added, again, adding these additional account team members to my existing list. Once it's done with that, we're going to go to the send email action. So let's go ahead and open that up because there's a lot of moving parts here in the send email action. But this is a out of the box, comes with Flow element. You don't have to download it from anywhere, which is great. It is part of Salesforce, and it has a lot of different options in here, which can be a little overwhelming. And it was when I first saw it. I'm like, geez, how do I fill all these things out? Good news is you don't need everything that's in here. They're all for specific use cases. So I'll just talk quickly about, of course, my use case here was just to keep it simple. And I went ahead and I wrote an email body out, which is just a, in this case, a text template, right? So I've got my text template. When I built this text template, though, I built it using text template has two options, as plain text or rich text. If you use the rich text option, what you need to make sure is that you say rich text formatted body is true. So these kind of go together. Your email body is just plain text. You don't need to worry about this, but if it is rich text, make sure you set this to true. Otherwise, it will not come through properly to your users. They'll see all these HTML codes that won't make a lot of sense. The other thing, I just wrote an email subject in. I could, again, use a text template for this. I could also make them dynamic, right? I could add in the text template editor, you can pull in fields from any of the objects you've queried, whether it's the starting object, if it's a record triggered flow, or it could be anything that you've done a get element on. In this case, I could do a get on the account, for example, to pull all the account information. Since it's a screen flow, I won't have a starting record variable to work with, but I do have the account ID, so I could get the account ID information, pull into a record variable, then pull it into a record variable, and from there I could access all the information from the account or from anywhere else in Salesforce that has a relationship to the object from which I start. So I can have more dynamic subject and body. So that's again up to you how you want to build that out. I kept it simple here for this demo purpose. The next thing I'm having it related to record ID. So this is, again, if I'm going to be dynamically populating this, I like to always put a related record ID. This is optional. You don't have to do this. It will be necessary, though, later if you wanted to log on email send, which we'll talk about in a minute, but we're not doing that here for this. Again, this is the main point of this demo is this recipient address list. So there is a recipient address list. This is expecting a comma delimited list. So if I wanted to include this and I hover here, it's going to say, yeah, give me a comma delimited list of recipients. Well, that's not how I built my list. I could have built it that way. I think it would have been more complicated than the way I built it, so that's why I didn't do it that way. But if you did have a comma delimited list, you could use that. Instead, I'm using a collection variable to store a list of email addresses. So that's the distinction. Instead of them being comma delimited, they're actually in a record variable that's a text type, and I added them again using my assignment elements. So that's this variable here. And that, again, you saw me build that, or that was built actually through the transform element initially, and then added to here in the loop. And there we go. That's all the email addresses that we've had in a collection, and that's why I'm using this one here. So if you're going to follow my model, you'll want to make sure you use this collection and not the list option. So there's a few other things I'll just talk about, and then before I go on to tell you more about this, the last screen is just to confirm that the send was successful. So if you did want to use, again, a screen flow to do your send, to let people know that to have the users commit to sending the alert out, you can have a final screen to say, hey, success, it actually got to the end, it got through the whole thing. So let's talk a little bit about send email. So send email has a lot of options. One thing, let's say you don't want to deal with your email body here. You have already built an email template, a lightning email template that already has everything you want to have. It's already got all your tags to your other record that you're sending from. So instead of using email body, you could opt instead to use email template ID. So I could flip the switch here, but then that has some requirements. It does require that I include a recipient ID and in addition to the template ID. And it's also a good idea to use your related record ID, because if you're, again, related record will drive whatever dynamic tags you may have included in your email template. The recipient ID is a requirement for using template ID, and you just have to pick one of your contacts and grab their ID. Again, you'd want to do a get, maybe get the first contact and add them as the recipient ID on the record. They shouldn't get the email twice. Salesforce is really good about not sending to the same email twice, but you do need to populate at least the recipient ID of one of your contacts into this field in order for the template to work, because recipient is one of the dynamic features of Lightning email templates, especially specifically. So I think that's why they require that. But since I'm, oops, I can't even uncheck that. I gotta uncheck that. So that's where the if you want to just use the email template, that's how you do that. And then the other thing you could do is log on email send. Again, to log on email send does also require, I believe, the recipient ID. So if you try to log an email, you want to have it logged to the account you're sending from, the related record, and you can also log it against a specific contact. You got the recipient ID will be the contact relationship on that logged email. So that's a nice thing you can do here that can't do out of a standard email alert. That is super handy. So again, recommend that if you want to be able to log emails that users are using this button to send out, so that they have a record of what they sent on that. Of course, you can also have the option to have alternate senders. So that's if you don't want the user that's actually clicking the button to be the from address, you'll choose an alternate sender email, which would be from your organization-wide email addresses. So if you haven't set up any organization-wide email addresses, highly recommend you look into that, because that's generally required to have a sender email set up, because you have to validate that email address is actually a good email address as part of setting up organization-wide email addresses. So anyway, that's the main things I want to make sure I shared that would help make your send email even a little more dynamic or useful based on your use case. So let's take a look at what I want to do next is anytime I'm working with a flow, before I would normally save and activate it, I was telling my team to be sure you do a debug. So I went ahead and click the debug button and got my test record here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on run. And so you see, this is the screen that the user would see since I'm doing a screen flow. If it was a record trigger flow or auto launch flow, it would just jump right into the action, but it stops me here for the screen. So I'm going to click next. And oh, look at that, email sent. So good news is this is a sandbox environment. I have email.
Sorry to interrupt.
I have email set to
the screen.
Oh, sure. Oh, let me zoom in. Sorry. I'm zoomed way too far out. Sorry about that. Is that better?
We're not seeing the debug screen.
You're not.
Or flow.
Oh goodness. Because I was in a hurry to share. Let me stop sharing and try that again. So let me try that. Yeah, share screen. I was in a hurry to jump back in, so I apologize. I picked the wrong option.
Oh, no worries.
I got disconnected earlier. Let's try that. This will hopefully look a little better. Okay. Sorry, let me back up. Let's just click run again. I think this will be best. So we're back to the start since you missed my first screen. So we have again, that initial little screen that the users would see. Click next, and boom, it's email sent. So this is a very simple flow, screen flow. But now you can see on the right-hand side all the debug details, everything that that you might need to, if you're having an issue, if you're getting some kind of unhandled fault, this is a good way to find out what's going on, but just confirm everything's happening right. So let's just go through real quick everything that this has done. So we got the contacts on account. That's the first thing, that based on all those criteria being true. And of course, it says successfully found records. I did my decision just to validate that. And there's all my contacts. I then do a transform and add all the email addresses from those contacts to a list. So you can now see I've got Cody, Astro, and Cloudy. Hey, they're all going to get this email. They all got added in from their related contact records. Next thing, I'm getting the account team we saw before. and we're looping through all the account team members and adding those folks on here. So, and then now I've got my full email list. I go ahead and send the email. It's going to generate the send email out to all the users and and get me back to my final screen. So that was the last thing in the flow. So now we know debug worked. Everything went to all the people we expect, which is great. So what I want to show you is this. You can also add, since I am using a Lightning or a screen flow, I can add it to a Lightning page using a Lightning component. So you'll see that my component is right down here at the bottom right corner of the page. And to do that, just open up your Lightning page editor and search for flow. You'll see flow here. You can drag your flow component right on the screen, which is featured right here on the screen, and select the flow that you want to point to. So you can point to any screen flow right from here. And then all I have to do is check this box, pass record ID variable in, so it knows that my account ID variable, it's going to give me any input variables that I've identified. That's something I didn't go over, but when you create a variable, in this case an input variable, you want to make sure you check that box on the variable in the flow, make an input variable so that you can pass a variable ID into it. So in this case, the record ID. So I don't have to know the syntax here. This is done for me by Salesforce. And I recommend always using this. And then if there's anything else you need that's related to that record, just do the lookups and gets. You find very little value in trying to add additional input variables from again, in this case, from this account. I could try to pass more information from the account perhaps, but it just dirties the flow, I find, and it makes me have to then do some heavier lifting that I'd like to do on the front end here, whereas I can do everything in the flow. I can look up all the information I need directly in the flow. So anyhow, that's the whole demo. I hope that was useful to everybody, and I'll send it back to you, Jen.
Thanks, Mike. I like seeing other people's solutions, and I definitely learned something new today. I had no idea the transform element you can use to eliminate loops. So I'm going to need to play around with that a little bit. And I love how the simple email action is so versatile in terms of all the various features that you have. So thank you for showing us that and how to replace static hard-coded data and dynamically pull in the information we need with Flow. All right, so we are going to move on to the Q&A segment. So just a reminder to start your questions with a Q colon so I can easily identify them amongst the chat that folks might be posting. So here we go, and we're going to move into Q&A. All right, so before that, I want to recognize that we have folks joining from all over. So we have folks from Boston and Washington and Denmark and India. So we're international, which is pretty cool. All right, so let's get to the questions. Here, I'm going to pull this one in from Jason. Becca, why did you put the Slack notification in the async path versus the immediate?
Yeah, that's a great question, and an issue I ran into when I was first trying to use Slack and Flow. The short answer is the Slack core nodes have to be in either an asynchronous or a scheduled path. Just again, not a developer, but the way the computers process data, it's best to keep them. If they don't need to run immediately and save to that record immediately, it's always best to keep things on their own path, or on a scheduled or asynchronous path just for processing times. The short answer is you have to. The longer answer is it makes the computers happy if you put them over there.
And we want to make the computers happy for sure.
Always.
All right, so the next question is for Mike. I believe that came in during your demo. So can an email be sent with an attachment from Flow?
That's a really good question, and I don't know the answer to that. So I don't see a way that it can be sent using the simple email element. If I did a little research, I imagine there's probably somebody has come up with a solution for this, and there might be a more dynamic send email component out there, probably on Salesforce Labs, that you probably could include an attachment of some kind. But I currently don't know the answer to that. If that's 100% available.
Yeah, recommend perhaps posting that on the Trailblazer community for the Salesforce automation. And then I know that is monitored by the Salesforce automation PM. So post that out there and see what they have to provide for that. All right, so let's get to our next question. So in your screen flow, Mike, I guess there was a send email element at the beginning, and there's a question as to
Yes.
what that
Yep,
does.
so it's part of the screen flow. So because I'm decided to use this screen flow to send this to let the user send the email, it's the beginning of the flow. It's the front end that appears on the screen when you add the lightning component or the flow element to your lightning page. Whatever you put on that screen is what the user will see initially when their page renders. And then you could have more information on there. I kept it very simple. I just said, send an email to contacts on account, right? Just kept it very basic. But you could have more information. You could let the user input, like change the subject or even the description of information. You could limit again what users can do, and then allow them to have more flexibility in maybe what's going to get sent out, while excluding access to other things. So let's say you always want to only send to the certain recipient list, but you want to give them some flexibility in the subject and in the description. So you could add those as fields onto the flow, pass that as variables into your send email component later. But that send email was just a element at the beginning, was just the screen at the beginning of the flow.
Gotcha. All right, and then there's an additional question here. What prevents the email from going to the recipient in debug mode? Good
Okay, I'm
question.
sorry if I glazed over this. That's a really great question. And that it's because it actually will go to well, first of all, debug mode depends on which flow type you're in. In my case, if I had email services on in my org, so if I was in production, let's say, where email services are on, and I did this debug, the email is going out. It's going to hit everybody, and so it wouldn't be stopped. The reason it didn't go out in my sandbox is because I have email services turned off under deliverability. So if you go into settings, deliverability, I recommend in sandboxes you put it on system only mode. So only system emails like password resets and other things will get to you. You can turn email all the way off, but then you'll have a hard time resetting your password. Just a heads up, I've run into that directly as well. But if you have email all the way on, and you do a screen flow debug, that email is going out, whether you want it to or not.
I do want to say that you do not want to run debug in production because that's going to touch,
Good point.
if you have actions on your records, that's going to touch your production records.
Yeah,
So
I
you
think so.
definitely want to
Yes.
debug only in the sandbox, please. Just so
Especially on
we're
screen flows. Record triggered flows are a little more forgiving because there's a rollback mode. So on record triggered flows, they're always in rollback mode. And for auto launch flows, you have the option for rollback mode, but you don't have rollback mode on a screen flow. So it's going to do what it's going to do. So yeah, production testing, very dangerous.
yes. All right. And then the last one is a rhetorical question. Um, so why is business time functionality or it's essential? I think we all agree. So I would say go out to the idea exchange, put an idea out there, and then promote it so that other folks can vote on it, right? The more votes, it's going to get the eyes of the PMs, and then they could look and prioritize that into as a future feature. So definitely go ahead and put that into the idea exchange. All
I
right. So
will say though, I mean, Salesforce Labs does offer it for free. Yes, It should be core, but it will take you 2 clicks to install it. The other thing, having seen over 100 plus orgs in my career, is very few orgs actually set up their business hours. So, maybe if more people were using business hours, I know that, large companies often do, but so many orgs I log into have 24 hours on, and that's how it comes out of the box. So if you are using it, even if you're not going to use it in Flow, having the business time functionality to call in your Apex or just to have, I would say is core. And it's one of the things I always install when working in a brand new org. So yes, it should be included, but until it is, we've got a free offering from Salesforce Labs to get it in there.
Yes. All right. And it looks like we answered all the questions. So we're going to move on to the recap. So let's recap what we learned from Becca's portion today. We learned how to build clean, efficient flows, how to calculate the business hours with a free Salesforce Labs app that she talked about, and how to call Apex from a flow. And to recap what we learned from Mike is how to use Flow to send dynamic emails without having to use email alerts, to build that dynamic email recipient list for those emails, and to reference email templates if desired. And I want to give a heads up on our next episode next month. I have an old community friend on, Ohad Adan. So he will show us a pretty cool solution for streamlining the ability to accept documents via email and then process them in Salesforce records. So I highly recommend you bookmark that live stream page now so you'll be reminded of the event the day of. And subscribe to our Salesforce Admins YouTube channel so you're always aware of new content that we post up there. All right, so now it's your turn. I recommend that you read the Why You Should Avoid Hard Coding and 3 Alternative Solutions blog on our admin site, and check out the Salesforce Labs offering on the App Exchange using that short URL, and then hit the trail by taking the Build Flows for Flow Builder trail. All right, and I'm going to give a shout out to my other series, How I Solved It, where we take a business challenge and show how one awesome admin chose to solve it. Check out the playlist to watch their past episodes. And speaking of How I Solved It, I'm thrilled to announce that we're bringing the series live next month for a special live stream edition on November 7th. So if you were at Dreamforce, you might have caught our theater session featuring Dee Irvin and Carrie Webster. This live stream episode will be an exciting extension of that session. So we're not only showcasing their incredible solutions, but we're also going to take you through the design process behind them. So joining Dee and Carrie Webster, we'll have other stars from How I Solved It, Sky Tyler and Brandon Walton. We recommend that you sign up for the live stream page so that you don't miss that. And continue to get great content produced by the admin relations team. Check out our website, admin.salesforce.com, to find the latest blogs, podcasts, and videos. Listen to the Salesforce Admins podcast hosted by Mike Gerholt at all the places that you get your podcast content. And watch our past episodes of Automate This via the playlist on the Salesforce Admins YouTube channel. And with that, I want to thank both of you, Becca and Mike, for being my presenters today on Automate This. I hope you had fun.
Super great. Thanks for having me.
All right, and thank you for all of you for joining us on today's episode of Automate This. Remember, the best way to be notified when we live stream is to set the reminder on the live stream page, and you get the email reminder the day of the event. And we will see you next time.